Assalamu alaikum. In this video we will be installing the Clean compiler on Windows. Now there are two ways of doing so. First, the traditional way, and second, the new cool modern way. So this video really covers both installations, and you can use whatever you see fitting your needs. But we will be starting by installing the compiler traditionally, so head to the link wiki.clean.cs.ru.nl/download_clean webpage. No worries, the link will be attached in the resources of the lecture. As you can see, the compiler bundle can be installed on different operating systems. However, this time we are only interested in Windows. We will come back to the other operating systems later. Windows has two versions, the 32 bits and the 64 bits. My computer supports 64 bits, so I'll be installing that one. Now, there are two links. The only difference between them is the bundling technique used. I mainly download the .zip one. Feel free to download whichever you feel comfortable downloading. And as you can see, I have it already downloaded on my machine. So let's just open the file location and then extract it. The extraction will take a bit of time, so I'll be back when it finishes. Finally, after extracting is done, let's open the folder and see what's inside it. The folder contains many important things: the compiler, some libraries, and a text editor specifically made for Clean. You can use Visual Code or any editor though, but if you are going for the traditional classic installation, then the Clean IDE is the one to use. Now let's open the IDE, and the first time you open it, Windows will cry and say I do not trust the author of the application. However, let's click on more info and command it to run it anyways. The editor window will pop up and it contains a smaller grey window inside it. Let's totally ignore that for now and start writing some useless code. And to do that, we must create a new code file, and to do that, click on the file menu and create a new file. Let's call it main.icl and click save. Now let's type the following: module main start equal hello world between quotes. And this will be our first useless application ever made, but no worries, more useless applications will be popping along the way, I promise. Now, the time of truth. Let's compile and run by clicking the fifth top left icon, and good luck, cause the compiler will crash and the editor will crash. This actually was the first Clean prank I faced a few years ago when I was learning how to clean. The reason behind the crash was because we ignored the grey window earlier, and the grey window actually doesn't like it when it's ignored, because it defines the project, and a project in Clean is a file containing the configuration of the code, or literally meaning the structure of the code. And if you do not create it, the editor will die whenever you try to hit the compile button. So, to remedy that, let's create it, but first let's exit the editor and open it again. Now let's reopen the code we created. Then let's create a project file by clicking on the file menu and click on create new project. Keep the defaults and click save. As you can see, the grey window content has been updated, reflecting the project file. And now let's try to recompile our code again, but this time it will work. Two new smaller windows will pop up. The black one contains the output of the application, and the pink one contains the compiler logs. Also, the executable, the black window, can be accessed directly from the location of the code file. Finally, as we can see, the traditional compiler is handy and dandy and easy to set up. But don't forget the grey window. Never forget the grey window. Now let's focus on the modern cool way of installing the compiler, because it is important and we will be using it for the rest of the course. To install the Clean compiler the new modern way, head to the clean-lang.org/about.html webpage. If we scroll down a little bit, the page will instruct you on how to install a tool called Nitrile on the desired operating system. In this video we will be installing it on Windows, so click on the Windows tab. Now, what is Nitrile, you may ask? Well, Nitrile is a package manager for Clean, and a package manager is used to download already written Clean code from the internet. And by already written, I mean the code which was made by other people and is publicly available on the internet. The code on the internet is called a package, or a dependency, and Nitrile can install these packages, codes, dependencies, call it whatever. If you have already dealt with Python, or ever dealt with it, for example, then you have used pip to download Python modules, or if you came from a JavaScript realm, then you use npm to download JavaScript modules. So Nitrile for Clean is what pip is for Python and what npm is for JavaScript. Another thing to know is that Nitrile also can compile your code and output executable files. Now, enough of the theory part, and let's download this tool which will allow us to legally steal code from the internet. However, before we are able to download Nitrile, we must install another tool called Chocolate. Clicking on the Chocolate link will take us to the official page. Long story short, Chocolate is a tool which will allow us to install applications on our operating systems. Almost similar to the Microsoft Store. However, instead of installing the applications through a fancy graphical user interface, you can install the applications with PowerShell commands. And if you do not know what is PowerShell, just think of it as a tool allowing us to instruct Windows to do some cool stuff. For example, there are instructions for executing an application, others for configuring the operating system, and there are much more than that. Again, back to Chocolate. Think of it as the Microsoft Store that you can access through the PowerShell. So, since Nitrile requires it, let's install it. And if you do not get what Chocolate is, no worries. We will never really be touching this tool through the course. We just need it to exist on the operating system. So, let's click on the Try It Now button, scroll down, and copy the code for installing Chocolate for individual users. Now we need to put the instructions into the Windows PowerShell tool. So click on the Start and search for PowerShell. Click the tiny arrow and run it as an administrator. Now we just need to paste the code we copied from the Chocolate webpage and press enter. This will download and install the Chocolate application. Now to check if Chocolate is installed properly, please type Choco into the PowerShell window. If the version is printed, then great news, you have installed it correctly. Now let's install Nitrile. So head back to the Clean installation page and copy the Nitrile installation command. Then open a new PowerShell window as an administrator again. And paste the command there. The installation will take some time. I will be back when it finishes. To check if Nitrile is installed correctly, close the PowerShell window and reopen it again. Type Nitrile and hit enter. The output describes how to use the Nitrile command, but we are not really interested in that just yet. Keep in mind that you might need to reboot the computer to make it work, so please consider rebooting. And to be on the safe side, I'll reboot my computer, but before doing that, consider saving the Getting Started with Nitrile page to your bookmarks. This page will be very handy in the future. Anyway, I will restart my computer now. So, after the computer is restarted, head to where you want to write your first Hello World application. We will be using Visual Code Editor to write the code, and the Visual Code Editor is just a text editor with some buffs. Think of it as a GigaChad notepad maybe. The link for installing it is attached in the resources of this video. Now, there are several ways to open Visual Code. The easiest way though is to right-click or shift right-click on Windows 11 and start a PowerShell window by clicking the Open PowerShell window here. Then type code dot and hit enter. Also, you can open another folder from within the Visual Code Editor, and this is done simply by clicking the File tab in the Visual Code menu and choosing the Open Folder option. Also, another way to open the editor is by clicking on the Open with Code tab from the Windows context menu. However, this tab will be only shown if you chose to include the Open with Code feature during the Visual Code installation. For this setup, we require to create a new folder containing the source code. You can call the folder anything, but the convention is to call it SRC, standing for source code. Now let's create a file inside the SRC folder, and the file will be our Hello World application. Let's call it entry.icl. The name doesn't matter, you can call it whatever. Now let's start writing some code. Every file in clean starts with the keyword module followed by the file name, entry in our case. Just don't write the .icl part. After that comes our code. But keep in mind that every usable application in clean must contain a function called start. This is the thing that is executed when the application is being executed. So, for this simple useless application, let's just make it print hello world or return hello world. Type start, then equal, and the hello world between double quotes. Now we have our code ready, but it looks extremely ugly. We can add colors and highlights to the keywords to help us differentiate what is what. And there is a Visual Code extension which does just that. Let's download it. And if you don't know, an extension is just an additional feature you can add to Visual Code, and there is an extension for highlighting clean code. So let's navigate to the extensions panel by clicking on the four funny squares on the left. This will take us to the extensions area. Let's search for the clean extension, and we found it. Click on the install. Let's click to files icon on the left to go back to the code and see how it looks now. It looks perfect and colorful. To be able to compile the code, we require to create a Nitrile configuration file, and the easiest way to do that is through Windows PowerShell and through the use of the Nitrile tool to create the file. So let's open a new PowerShell window. However, this time we are going to use another feature in Visual Code, which allows us to use PowerShell from inside the Visual Code editor. So click on the Terminal tab and click Open New Terminal. This will open a new PowerShell panel. Now let's type Nitrile init and hit enter. Now let's answer the questions given to us by Nitrile tool, and the Nitrile will create the file based on the answers. 1. The package name is just the name of the application, and it can be literally anything, and it can be changed later as well. Just remember that it does not accept spaces, only alphanumerics are accepted, and remember to name it something cool in case you want to make it public. Anyway, I'll be naming mine as some package 1 because we are not going to make it public. 2. The description, and this can be literally anything. You can write anything inside there. And the only purpose of this thing is to describe your package. 3. The package type decides if it's an application or just a code that others will be using. In other words, does the code contain the start function or not? Let's leave it as an application, by pressing enter. The version. Basically, the convention is that the first number is the major release, the middle one is the minor release containing some features and fixes, while the last number is some patches. Since our application will not be released to the public, the versioning system doesn't really matter, so I'll be writing 0.0.1. 5. The license, which tells people how to use your package. Can everyone resell it? Can everyone use it freely or even edit it? For example, one famous open source license on GitHub is MIT, which allows everyone to use your code for whatever reason they like. Since we are not publishing this package, let's skip the license part. Remember, you can literally change everything later. 6. The GitLab namespace. And GitLab is a website where you can upload your code to, and we will not be really uploading the Hello World application yet, so let's skip this part as well. 7. You can write your name in the maintainer section. The contact email is self-descriptive. The people who will be downloading your package can send you spams there, so be careful. I'll be typing an imaginary email because it doesn't really matter, we can really change this later. After finishing the set of questions, we see a new file added to the Visual Code Files panel. This is the configuration file that Nitrile needs, and it is a YAML file type. And a YAML file is a simple text file used for organizing data in a readable way, much like a list of nodes consisting of key value pairs. The Nitrile tool understands these values. Note that to save the lecture time, your homework will be to read about the YAML syntax. Also, I'll be sharing useful links in the resources of this lecture. Now, we must edit the YAML configuration file to be able to compile the code. If you do not understand the YAML syntax yet, please just copy-paste my configurations. We are doing it this way because for this entire chapter, we will only be setting the nitrile.yaml file once. Also, we will be revisiting the topic in depth in the far future. So, back to editing the nitrile.yaml file. First, let's add the dependencies. Again, the dependencies are publicly available code and executables that you can download from the internet. Anyway, we will need a package, a dependency called base. The base package contains all the stuff needed to build our clean code. So let's start by typing dependencies, then double colon, and press enter for a new line. Now let's add the base dependency by typing base, double colon, and the version required. In our case, we need anything compatible with version 1. Remember that YAML is indentation sensitive, so make sure to leave some spaces before the dependency name, in our case base. We also need to tell Nitrile where to search for the code. This is simply done by adding a src keyword to the YAML file, then double colon, and finally a new line. The src takes a list of folders that contain the source code, and an element in the list is defined by a hyphen in YAML. For example, we can add our src folder by typing hyphen space src. Finally, we are required to tell Nitrile how to build our application, and this is done inside the build keyword scope. So type build, double colon, and a new line, and inside the build entry, we add an app entry, and inside the app entry, we add script entry. Finally, the script accepts a list of elements, so let's add CLM as an element of that list. And the CLM is the name of the clean compiler. Also, the clean compiler can be configured by editing the main and target values. The main value takes the file name containing the start keyword, and the target value tells the compiler where to store the compiled application. This was probably a lot to handle, but this is only done once. We will not be really touching this file for a while. Now back to the PowerShell window. Let's type Nitrile update. This will sync Nitrile to the Internet Packages database. You can think of it as if Nitrile is reading the news about the new online packages. After updating Nitrile, let's command Nitrile to download the dependencies listed in the nitrile.yaml file. So type nitrile fetch. As you can see, a new folder is created containing all the source code and executables of the dependencies. Remember that we only have one dependency, the base dependency. Finally, after downloading the dependencies, we can compile our project, and it can be done simply by typing nitrile build in the PowerShell window. However, this fails dramatically on my setup. The clean developers always love to prank us. Anyway, the main reason of the failure is that the location of my project contains some folders with spaces in their names. As you can see, the project is found at D, workspace, workspace, courses, clean space, programming space, blah blah blah, etc. Nitrile doesn't like that. Let me copy the project somewhere else, which doesn't contain spaces, and try again. Let's navigate to another folder which does not contain spaces. Then create a new folder for the project and make sure it doesn't contain spaces either. Let me remove the extra folders to show you that we only need the code and the nitrile.yaml configuration file to rebuild the project. Now let's open Visual Code again. And let's start a new PowerShell window and type nitrile update, then nitrile fetch, finally nitrile build. This time it will work because the new location of the project is spaceless. Now that we have successfully compiled our application, let's run it. This is easily done by just typing where the executable is. And remember that we stored it in the bin folder under the name of app. And finally, we have our hello world output. Now for the last piece of advice, you will need to recompile every time you change something in the code. So, for example, let me add something to the code. Now if we run the application again, we see the old output. This is because we have not compiled the new source code yet. So let's repeat the compilation process and execute the new application. Type nitrile build again, and then let's run the application again. As you can see, the code is compiled successfully and the output is correct. Also, we can navigate to the bin folder manually and see the executable named as app.exe. And this was it for this lecture. We covered two techniques for installing and using the clean compiler on Windows. The traditional way, which is faster in setup but not used anymore, especially for large complicated projects. And the new modern way, which requires us to install Chocolate, then Nitrile, and then configure Nitrile, download the dependencies, and finally be able to compile the code. This setup is much longer, but it is the standard today. Regardless of the setup you choose to continue with the tutorials, the code itself should be the same. Thank you for watching and goodbye.